Before you go to bed tonight, there's a good chance someone in Ohio will die of gun violence.
Nearly every night, we tell you about a senseless shooting, or a gang fight, or an assault. And it's not unusual for the suspect to be a teenager.
There is a youth violence crisis that is threatening our neighborhoods, straining our police departments, keeping our hospitals busy, and putting a generation at risk.
Tonight, we examine the crisis. What is this epidemic of violence doing to our community? And what can we do to try to stop it? We've got a panel of experts, but we need you to get the conversation started.
Good evening, everyone. We are coming to you live tonight from the historic King Arts Complex, where dreams do come alive. I'm Mike Jackson with Colleen Marshall.
And we welcome you to our town hall, Confronting Youth Violence. We also want to welcome the listeners of 107.6 The Beat and Power 107.5. They're simulcasting with us tonight for this important community conversation. And we want it to be a two-way conversation. We'll be talking to some of the audience members tonight. And Mike, we have some distinguished guests with us here as well.
And before we introduce our panel, we'd like to have an introduction tonight from our mayor, Andrew Ginther. He is our 53rd mayor in the city of Columbus. He's got almost 1 year under his belt. Please give a round of applause for Mayor Andrew Ginther.
Good evening to those of you who have joined us here tonight and those who may be tuning in at home. I want to thank NBC4, particularly Ken Friedman and Colleen Marshall and Mike Jackson, all for working so hard to put this event together. I know that the panelists and I look forward to the conversation and questions from the audience here tonight. I'm grateful to City Council President Zach Klein and his colleagues, Safety Director Ned Pettis, Acting Chief Quinlan, as well, that are here this evening. I'm grateful to the people of Columbus who are engaging in a conversation. This is the beginning of that conversation, and I encourage everyone to remain engaged and involved as we move forward. In many ways, Columbus has been spared some of the violence that we have seen in other parts of the country. We have been fortunate. We are not immune. Conversations like this one help us broaden our perspectives and understand different points of view. Youth violence is a symptom of other systemic problems. Children are born wide-eyed and curious, but unfortunately, some are also born into difficult circumstances. We know that high-quality education, affordable health care, employment, access to fresh fruits and vegetables are all critical to the development of our children. We're working hard to make sure that all of our children have these basic things. But what about the young people now who didn't grow up in safe environments and who have turned to violence? We cannot discard them, and we won't. I'm happy to talk to you tonight about programs the city is putting forth to reduce violence, but I'm also here to listen to your concerns, your ideas, and your contributions. As your mayor, I don't have all the answers, but together we can come up with some common sense solutions and some priorities moving forward to make our young people safer and stronger in the years to come.
And of course, it's all about dialogue tonight. We all know the issues, we all know the problems. We have a very diverse panel that hopefully will shed some light on this issue. In addition to the mayor, we'd like to welcome Judge Kimberly Cocroft, who's joining us. Your Honor has spoken to many schools, middle schools, high schools on youth violence, and is also very involved in working with the Columbus City School Program with helping the young people make better choices, because generally, if you get to the judge, it's already too late. Also, I'd like to introduce Jason Morton, who's the principal of Flex High School, the very first principal of Flex, and I always believe there's a line that you can draw between education, employment, and crime. We'll address that issue. And also I'd like to introduce Felicia Saunders. Felicia is the president of the East Haven Block Watch organization. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, her involvement became because the crime was right at her front door. She lost her son in 2009. The issue of crime, yellow crime tape all over our neighborhoods. It signals there's been a bad situation, something bad has happened. It really doesn't matter what neighborhood it's in. Just a few months ago, I sat down with the mayor and we talked about youth violence and how it could be from Main Street all the way to City Hall.
In their communities in general, with the disproportionate amount of violence being committed against people of color in this community, in this country.
At a young age, Devontae Little found himself caught in the legal system, but made a decision to change when he was dodging bullets simply because he looked at a guy he didn't know.
Like, I just froze, like, is that really a gun? And then when he shot, I was just like, I almost lost my life because I looked at a guy in the store.
Devontae carries the traumatic scars from that incident as his life is mixed with black-on-black crime.
Nobody's helping us, and we're supposed to look for each other for help. But my own people won't even help me. They'd rather take from me and kill me.
The REACH program at Impact is for 16 to 24-year-olds, encouraging re-engagement to education, helping to find employment, and providing the needed stability in their lives.
Many times they've been involved in maybe the juvenile justice system, maybe they have some problems at home, so they don't naturally come in trusting adults, and we have to work very hard to rebuild that. We know that this is needed, it's necessary, and if for one moment we lose sight of that, I mean, who do they turn to? So that's a big responsibility for us, and we definitely keep that in mind. Little is obtaining the needed tools to a successful life, as his focus is now on opening his own business.
I just feel like the world just hated me, just because I don't exist. The world just hated me, so why should I love it? And then there's people that actually love you, and then you can see that life is actually what you make it.
Now, the REACH program by Impact served about 100 clients last year. They're up to 120 this year. And Mayor, first of all, I want to get your reaction, not just the efforts of Impact and what other organizations are doing, but this young man who felt that he couldn't trust people.
That's right. Well, and to think about it, right here in our county, there are over 20,000 young people, ages 16 to 24, that are currently not enrolled in any schooling or working. So over 20,000 kids that in many respects are out there aimlessly, not working or enrolled in school. And so what can we be doing as a community to engage and offer opportunities to those young people who might have faced some of the same challenges?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Colleen, I know that you got at least one question now from our audience.
To encourage the audience members to hand some questions over here to Jasmine, who's taking them so that we can hear what you have to say. And with us with our first question of the night is Willa Jackson, who has a question about safety.
Yes. What is one sure way to help keep our children safe? We have heard license and registration placed on the dashboard with the window rolled up, hands on the steering wheel with the fingers out. Will this actually help?
You know, maybe we should direct this to some of our safety forces, and we do have Ned Pettis here, our safety director, or one of the police officers might want to chime in. How should young people react when they're pulled over by a police officer? Put you on the spot.
Okay, do you want me to stand?
Sure. What's your name?
I'm Acting Chief Tom Quinlan.
Okay, and Tom, I know that this is something that you have to be talking to your officers about. What should young people be doing, and should they have the fear that they sometimes have of police officers?
Well, you're correct. We do speak to our officers routinely about this, but more importantly, we're now talking to the community about it and letting them know, because they are the recipients of our service, and so they need to know what is it we expect from them and how can we create a better outcome. So on your question, as far as what to do when stopped by the police, the most important thing is to pull over, give some indication that you recognize the officers there, pull over, and turn a dome light on if it's at nighttime so you can see the interior of the car. Have all occupants of the vehicle sit mildly still so they're not reaching around in the vehicle. That gives officers who can't see in the car concern that they're hiding something or retrieving a weapon. You mentioned roll the windows up. It's actually better to roll the window down and preferably even the passenger side window. That way when we come up, you're not reaching for controls in your car. The window's already down and your hands are on the steering wheel, as you said, with your fingers out, so we can see. Even if an officer gets stopped, they do the same thing, just so people don't think that they have something concealed in their hands or they're reaching for their wallet or reaching in the glove box. It's best to have your hands out and wait for instructions. Don't remove your seatbelt. Don't do anything until the officer says, good evening, my name's Tom Quinlan, I'm stopping you for whatever, may I see your license registration? Then you can simply say, my license is in my rear pocket or in my purse, may I reach in and get that? And then we know what you're expected to do. And
that's why we want to have
and
that
let me
license.
hear that.
We want that license and registration on the windshield so that we can reach forward and hand it to you, because too many lives are being lost when we say we're reaching in our pocket and, we're shot.
you make a very good point. The question I would have in response to that is, how would you get your license registration out? Because one's in your wallet, in your purse, one's in a glove box. How would you get that out before the police come up to the car? It's best to wait until the police come up and ask you for what they want. They may not even ask for that if they're stopping for something else. Wait till they ask, because otherwise you're reaching around the car before the officer gets up there and they don't know exactly what it is you are reaching for. Just be patient, wait, they'll ask you and they'll tell you, I need to see your license registration. You tell them, it's in my wallet, it's in my glove box, may I get that and retrieve it? Then we know what to expect you to do, and so we're watching for that, and that's okay.
All right, we thank both of you so much. Will, a very good question, and this is what we want, dialogue, what you expect and what people fear, because the reality is, Mike, people sometimes aren't sure how to act around police officers, and we know from police officers those stops can be some of the most dangerous situations that they face on a daily basis. Okay, we're going to take one more question. Can we have your name?
Yes, Marisa Gonzalez.
And what's your question for us?
My question is, what can we do to include the Hispanic community? In addition to that, how come we don't have a liaison in the Hispanic community? We have for African American, we have for gay and lesbian community. How come we don't have a liaison for the Hispanic community, being that we are growing?
It is a growing community, and we can ask the mayor to answer that question for us if you don't mind.
Sure. We created just last year, in addition to our community liaison officers, diversity and inclusion officers. And so we have one specifically identified and charged with outreach to the African American community, and then new Americans. So the Latino community would be involved would be covered under the umbrella of new Americans. So the folks from the Somali community, Latino community, we have one of the fastest growing Nepali communities in the country. And we're going to continue to focus on minority recruiting, and that involves both African Americans, Latinos, women, folks from the LGBT community to serve in police and fire, and that is one of Director Pettis's top priorities as our new safety director.
We have seen that new immigrant community have different needs concerning the Hispanic community. We're talking about religion beliefs, we're talking about norms and cultural. So, I mean, just being saying that new immigrants, for us, is just not enough, because they have a different need. All communities need a specific, target, or we can say liaison that we can address our certain issues that we have.
Mayor, you have Hispanic community, you also have Somalians, you have a growing immigrant community. So how are you going to face that level of diversity as this city continues to grow?
Well, I think particularly with both police and fire, continue the work that we're doing around cultural competence and education. We were just recognized nationally for the work that we're doing that Chief Jacobs has led around implicit bias, but we need to continue to do outreach to recruit more people of color into the Division of Police and Division of Fire. The bottom line is our police and fire divisions ought to reflect the great diversity of this city, and we currently don't. And it is a top priority of the safety director, the police chief, and the fire chief, and we're committed to making improvements and doing more to better serve the people of Columbus.
You know, thank you, Mayor. And earlier, about a month or so ago, I had a conversation with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty not long after she took part in a sit-in on Capitol Hill about gun violence when the Democratic members of Congress decided they weren't going to leave the floor of the House until they had resolution on some kind of a gun violence bill. That really did not happen, but she says she's still committed, and it's time for all of us to take a stand.
It's very personal for me. I could have been one of those kids coming up. I grew up in the inner city. I went to public schools, and I know what saved me was having parents who kept me engaged.
Joyce Beatty wants to know who's going to save today's kids. Too many living in neighborhoods hard hit by gun violence. More than 4 million assaults, robberies, and other violent crimes involving a gun in the last decade. 30,000 gun deaths in America each year. Here in Ohio, a gun death every 8 hours. How much of this is cultural? How much of it involves gender and race?
I think if you look at the history and you look at the disparities that we have when it comes to particularly African American men, someone told us the #1 issue is poverty. We have taken away programs for after-school programs. We have taken away programs that fund jobs. We have taken away community facilities.
We really want to treat gun violence as a mental health issue.
Mike Branch is one of the teens who lives in Beatty's district, and he agrees we need to look for what's setting the stage for gun violence.
I don't know what their mental state is, so I'm not making an excuse for anybody that would go out and kill some people, but I'm just saying I don't know where their mind was at when they were doing that.
Branch wants people to start talking to each other, and Congresswoman Beatty wants to help make that possible.
We're all in this together. We all have a responsibility.
And I'm right now with Judge Kimberly Cocroft, who deals with gun violence and youth violence, because you are on the bench. And as Mike said earlier, by the time they get to you, in many ways, it's too late. Is that a frustration point for you?
It is absolutely frustrating for me. I've been on the bench now for 7 years, and I see a lot of young people who find themselves in that predicament because they've made a split-second choice that has lifelong consequences. And so it's important for me to spread the message that we need to have a collaborative approach to addressing this issue. It's not just the courts, it's not just the mayor, it's not just our police department, it's the entire community that needs to be engaged with these young people.
What is the common denominator that you see with the young people who end up in your courtroom? I mean, is there something? We heard people talking about poverty and education and the lack of maybe after-school opportunities. Is there a common denominator you see with the young people?
The common denominator that I see is young people who are looking for acceptance. They are afraid to be leaders. They're inclined to be followers. And so someone suggests to them, let's go and do this, let's go and do that. They follow along. There are consequences that change the course and direction of their life. And so it's not necessarily that they don't have a support system in place, though that does happen, but they are inclined to want to be accepted by a larger group of peers. And that's why I see a lot of the young people that I see in my courtroom.
And you see some of the same people over and over and over again, don't you?
Unfortunately, I do have a number of repeat offenders, but I don't want to create the impression that there is a sense of hopelessness. There are some defendants that I see who are willing and ready to make a change. We give them the opportunity to make that change, and they are leading successful and productive lives. And so it's just about making sure that my defendants understand that their lives have value and worth, that we believe in them, that if they want to be rehabilitated, we are willing to join with them in that effort.
One of the things you said really touched me, because I know Felicia Saunders, who's one of our panelists today, lost her son to gunfire back in 2009. And Felicia, as you hear, lifelong consequences, no one knows about lifelong consequences more than a mother who lost a child to gun violence. How has that spurred you to become the community activist that you are today?
Dealing with a lot of mothers who've been in the same situation as myself, they break down. Their hope is gone. They're sad and they're broken, but I refuse to be that person. I refuse to allow myself to wallow in my pain. So I decided to take it. Thank you. I decided to take my pain and go out there and make a difference in my community and go and talk to the gang members and talk to the children in the park to find out what is it that I can do with the love that I'm bringing them to help them turn from their wicked ways.
Yeah, and Mike, I know you have another question from the audience member, and then we're going to go back to the panel again as well, but please.
What is your name and what's your question?
My name is Monique Williams, and actually my grandfather was a 3-term city councilman, including president and the head of the Columbus Bar Association.
Congratulations.
So anyway, my question is, what programs are going on in the Linden area to combat youth violence, and what are their statistics?
Sure. We actually just came from a meeting at St. Stephen's here tonight, and we're starting the launch of a program going after a Promise Grant that could lead to a multi-year, multi-million-dollar investment, particularly around education reform and educational opportunities. And so Columbus City Schools with Dr. Good, other community and neighborhood leaders were there as well. One of the things that we continue to do in Linden is make use of our community liaison officers as well as our student resource officers. So this past summer, the Community Safety Initiative, for the first time ever, actually had our student resource officers, which are our officers in the schools during the school year, out in our rec centers and pools and places where children gather in the summer to build those relationships and to make sure that children felt safe, as well as working with community liaison officers and outreach directly to neighborhood and community leaders to build trust. One of the things that we've targeted in Linden and other places is expanding our bike patrol. We have one of the largest bike patrol of our uniform officers in the country, and it helps to remove some of the barriers and challenges with officers and cruisers. It's easier to talk to an officer who's on a bicycle than in a cruiser in a much more tight-knit neighborhood and area.
Inspiring. That's inspiring. I'm really glad to hear it. Thank you.
Take that back to your friends in Linden.
Right.
All right, thank you. I'd like to address this question to Jason Morton, a principal. So often our educators are turned into babysitters, social workers, even probation officers. They get away from the job of teaching. What is a challenge? What is your challenge as an administrator when it comes to education, trying to keep these kids not only focused on academics, but trying to keep it on the right track?
I think the number one challenge we have is getting enough appropriate adult touches on each kid. Our kid, we're asking too many small group of people to do too much lifting. It's the same few people doing all the lifting. We have to find a way to involve more of our community with our kids. They're our kids. This is not a governmental these are our kids. I strongly suggest, I don't know if I'm going to get another opportunity to talk, so I strongly suggest we adopt a high school. Of course I want it to be mine, but pick a high school. If everybody in this room was to adopt 2 kids at a local high school, and you're just going to you'll do nothing but make sure they get to school. If you just made sure they got there, we have a serious attendance issue across the board, not traditional, public, private, charter, period. We have an attendance issue. We need to get the kids in school. If everybody just in this room was to commit themselves to making sure that 2 kids got to a high school, adopt 1 high school, that would change that neighborhood drastically. And the second part is retaining those kids once they graduate, getting them involved in our community.
All right. And with a question now, your name and your question.
Yes, my name is John Ramos. I am the council president for LULAC Columbus, that's the League of United Latin American Citizens. My question goes along with what a friend of mine just asked. It's the Hispanic Latino community liaison position. My cousin retired from the police. He had that position, Sergeant Kenneth Ramos, and that was a big loss when he retired. It took more than 5 years for him to gain trust within the community. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest situations that I had to confront was the assassination of a Salvadorian kid in Ennis Park. I reached out to the police to request help, to understand what was going on, and no one returned a phone call. The only person who really reached out to me was Ermo Hernandez from your office, I believe. Now, that situation right there, it's gang related. And I have not heard no follow-up on this. Right now, it's quiet, but that's one of their strategies. What are we gonna do about this gang, MS-13 from El Salvador?
Well, I think you ask a fair question and make a great point. Officer Ken Ramos was one of the finest police officers we've ever had in the division, and we were sorry to see him retire and move on to other things, but we remain committed through our current community liaison officers, our diversity and inclusion officers, as well as a renewed focus on minority recruitment to do our very best to build relationships. Now, specific to the case that you mentioned and any specific activities taking place with respect to our anti-gang unit in work, I'd ask probably Acting Chief Quinlan to offer any comments regarding that.
Thank you, sir. Chief Jacobs has just recently appointed Sergeant James Fuqua to be the diversity inclusion officer for the Hispanic community. So he is already in the process of building the relationships and building the database of who he needs to reach out to talk to. So if you want to call and talk to him, just reach out to him, and I'm sure it'll be taken care of. Okay, sir? Can I get his later on his full afterwards? I'll get it to you. Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
You know, I'm wondering if while we have this minute with more people walking up with questions, I really would like you to get back and describe to us what you're doing at Flex School that's different maybe than the traditional education that we're seeing, and how it's impacting young people.
We're a high school, 14 to 22 years old. We educate students who are considered at promise or at risk, depending on the terms you're comfortable or used to. One thing we do that's unique is we meet one-on-one with our students. Our students make appointments with our teachers, and they meet one-on-one with their teacher. We're able to close learning gaps because we're able to create a safe environment where students can admit honestly things like, I can't read. Like that will cause a behavior issue in your community and will cause a behavior issue in your school. A kid is able just to admit it, and that's our school format. I do the home visits personally. If you miss a day of school, I'll be at your door. But we need more people involved. The school's growing. I was able to do all the home visits last year. We had 56 kids. We're already at 100. You see the issue we're going to have, though, with, okay? That's where the community comes in. We all have to be a part of this change. We all have to be a part. We were able to close learning gaps. Kids were able to go from reading at a 3rd grade level to reading at a 5th grade level. And it's 2 years. It's not on pace yet. But if they keep that up in 4 years, they will graduate on pace as far as their reading, which will close the gap with violence and the things they're able to do in the streets. It will close that gap because now they're employable. But that's some of the things we do. That's some of the things we do. We meet one-on-one with our students by appointment.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Doesn't that sound like a great program? Yeah. It really does. It really does. And they're having great success rate at your school. I understand. What's your graduation rate?
Well, last year was our first year, so we don't yet have that graduation rate because you got to have your 2nd year data.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You know, research shows that children are most vulnerable between the hours of 3 in the afternoon and 7 o'clock. That's usually when a caregiver is at work. How do kids get off the right track? How do they get on the right track during these hours? We'll explain that and delve into that more as this town hall confronting youth violence continues.
Tonight's simulcast broadcast of this NBC4 Town Hall was made possible through partnerships with the King Arts Complex, the City of Columbus, 106.7 The Beat, and Power 107.5.